Recording is on.
Okay, we are officially go. So welcome to this design review for Revault.
Hello, thank you very much for having me on Badela. I'm Edouard, and I'm working on Revault for a little Portuguese company whose name is Wizard Sardine. It's a strange name, but it's funny. Revault birthday was 2 years ago when Kevin and Antoine, two other French guys, just met and decided to work on a new Bitcoin custody solution. Okay, so Revault is a new Bitcoin custody solution, and the goal, the target, is to have something very more useful for user in terms of security for funds, for a lot of Bitcoins. The idea is a multisig is not enough in terms of security and usability, because when you use a multisig, generally when you are an exchange or a big enterprise, you need also to move sometimes the funds. And when you need to move the funds, you can't ask for every stakeholder to sign again each spend transaction you want to do. The idea is generally you have only a multisig with n of m of 2 or 3, something like this. So finally, you only have 3 stakeholders, 3 people with keys of your funds, and 3 people is definitely not enough in terms of security. Maybe it's weird to imagine that in Tesla does not use, for example, a third-party solution for storing their coins. Maybe they only have just Elon Musk and the other guy just have 2 guys with 2 keys, and everybody can go and kidnap their kids, and just, I don't know. In terms of security, only have 2 people on the multisig is not enough. But the problem is when you raise the number of keys, when you do a multisig of 10 people, for example, it's extremely difficult to move the funds, because you need the signatures of the 10 people to move each time you want to spend. So Revault idea is this: we want to increase usability but not decrease security. It's a typical Bitcoin problem. Like Bitcoin is very secure, but in terms of UX UI, it's very difficult, because we want to increase the usability, but we don't want to decrease the security. You have some resources if you want to check out. So yes, the idea of Revault is to separate what kind of users. What are the personas? I don't know how to pronounce personas. We have the stakeholders. The stakeholders are people who want to just secure the funds, and we have the managers, the people at the exchange who need to retrieve money from the cold wallet into the warm wallet and start paying, I don't know, clients, stuff like this. So the stakeholders and the manager are 2 different roles. And when you're a stakeholder, finally, you don't want to manage funds. You just want to sleep well, to be sure that every day you don't have a problem of spending transactions to sign. You just want to be sure that your funds are secure, and that's it. So the idea is maybe we can increase the number of stakeholders, like you can have 10 stakeholders, and the stakeholders can sign pre-signed transactions we can have a big multisig of 10 keys. The stakeholders every day give pre-signed transaction to managers, and managers, when they want to spend the funds, they only have to broadcast the pre-signed transactions. So the idea is you have in Revault, in the Revault protocol, you have two kind of transaction, or maybe three kind of transaction. You have the first transaction is the unvolt transaction. The transaction that is
It's probably Johnny's call.
Sorry, what? Is there a problem?
Someone unmuted their mic.
I think it's all good. It's just Ed joined without being muted,
sorry.
I think. So I think we're all good.
Sorry. I can back up. Okay. So you have the managers have the present transactions. We have what we talk about is a non-vote transaction. It's a transaction who spend the big multisig of stakeholders. He spends some UTXOs and has a time lock to the multisig of managers. During this time lock, we have some watchtowers that can cancel the transactions, the spending transactions. I don't know if you find the schema is clear for you or not. But the idea is typically this: stakeholders give pre-signed transactions to managers. Managers broadcast the non-vote transactions, and the spend transactions are delivered to Watchtower. Watchtower check the spending policy of the spend transactions on the non-vote and say no, we don't want the funds to be spent. If it's not the case, the funds are spent. If the spend policy are not good, the funds are sent back to stakeholders.
I have a question here.
Yes.
I hear my own echo. Does it sound okay?
Yes. You.
Okay. Cool. So sorry if you already mentioned this. So you call this a security protocol, but it's not a technical protocol. It's like a protocol.
I think your speakers are on. It's very hard to understand because we hear. Yeah. Okay. Now it's better.
Yeah.
But,
Test. Okay. So I just wanted to understand the frame of it, because this sounds like not something that an individual would do. This to me sounds more like something in a company or in a bank or in some environment that handles large amounts of Bitcoin, and they have tech setups, they have staff, they have multiple people, and they would set up and study and learn this protocol to manage big amounts of money. Do I understand that right?
Yes, you're totally right. The idea is it's for a company, but Revolt, the idea of the protocol is that you can scale the protocol. You can have only stakeholders and maybe no managers, and the stakeholders can have something called an emergency transaction. They can all share the signatures to have a pre-signed emergency transactions. In this case, all the funds can be locked somewhere if one of the stakeholders has a problem. So yeah, the idea is not for an individual, but more for several people who want to protect funds. And according to the size of the company, the size of each team, they can change the security they want. They can change the size of the multisigs of the stakeholders. They can change the spend policies in the watchtowers, and they can change even the fact that there is managers or no. And you can have stakeholders that can be also managers of funds, and you have this idea of a protocol. You can modify each component really easily. But yes, it's not for one person.
Okay, cool. And then one follow-up question. The stakeholders, they're people, managers are people, co-signers, they're also people, right? They're not, a co-signer does not mean a signing device, like a hardware wallet, or so they're all individuals.
Okay, the problem of the cosigner is a device.
Okay.
The idea is in case of replay attack, you imagine that an attacker want to bypass the watchtower spend policy.
Mhm.
What he will do is he will certainly create a legit spend transaction that pass the watchtower policy, and a non-legit that are retrieving all the funds to him. So he will just share the legit spend transaction to the watchtowers. The watchtowers they say, okay, you can unvault the UTXO. It means you can broadcast the time lock transaction that is unlocking the funds. And when the funds are unlocked, the attacker can then broadcast the non-legit spend transaction. This idea is, in order to prevent this, cosigners are part of the multisig of the managers, and they only sign only one transaction each time. Only one transaction for a targeted vault. What we are calling a vault is an UTXO with a pre-signed transaction, like the cancel transaction, the emergency transaction. It's just an UTXO with transactions shared between each stakeholders.
Okay, got it. Yeah, it gets very quickly complex. I just want to make sure I understand which of these actors are people and which ones are, basically computers doing things, responding to events like the watchtowers to respond to events that are observed on the blockchain, and which ones are people, where the people and machine interaction happens.
Yes.
So,
you have this machine like the watchtowers, because we wanted to have something to enforce policies during the spend, but you can have a stakeholder who can broadcast a cancel transaction when he sees that the funds are unlocking.
Mm-hmm.
When they are in the step of the unvaulting, when the unvault transaction was broadcast, they have some time to intervene and send the consent. But maybe I should go to the next.
yes,
next
please continue. Please continue.
Yeah. And I was also curious, Edward, what kind of feedback you would most like today, whether it's because there's a lot of parts, right? There's the kind of conceptual parts, and including naming and those sort of bits. There's your website, the GitHub, the user interface itself. So please tell us, what would you most like feedback on, and then we should make sure that we spend enough time on that.
Yes, most feedback is yes on the vocabulary. Maybe the fact that it's very difficult to apprehend at the first time shows that we have already a UX problem, maybe, because I used to work with it, so for me it's very easy to say unvault or unlocking funds, and yes, for someone who just discovers the protocol, it's really not easy.
Yeah, great. So why don't you go through this next screen on Figma, and then we maybe pause there and discuss some of this vocabulary and the things you might need to learn to use Revault.
Yes. Okay. So the idea is the typical day for a stakeholder in our mind is a stakeholder just wake up in the morning, he connect to the Revault application he has on the laptop, and he starts securing phones. The act of securing is the fact of signing the pre-signed transactions. The pre-signed transactions are transactions that can spend the UTXO that are deposited in the big multisig of the stakeholders. So the vocabulary for a vault is we have the status funded. Funded is when a vault, an ETXO can be spent by the stakeholders. Like it's in the multisig ETXO as a script pub key in the multisig. The fact of a vault is secured when the revocation transactions are signed. And a vault starts being active when the unvault transaction is signed, and the unvault transaction is shared to every managers. So every managers, when they have the unvault transaction, they can unlock the funds. The funds will have some time the unlocking of funds will have some I don't know, maybe X blocks to go. And during this time of unlocking funds, like the unvault, the stakeholder or the watchtower can cancel it and send back to the multisig. So each step you can see on this screen is the step of a vault in the Revault process. The idea,
thank you.
The idea is the stakeholder only have on one day, just once per day. He just has to sign the secure the transactions, share it to managers, and say, okay, guys, now just do your work. My watchtowers because maybe he has a replicated watchtower. My watchtowers are watching you. Don't miss up. So the managers receive the unvault transactions. They start specifying the spend transactions they want to do. I don't know, Kraken needs some funds. They start to do a spend transaction to Kraken. And they broadcast the unvault transaction. And once the vault is unvaulted, the funds are unlocked, he can send the spend transactions if there is no cancel between.
Cool. I think I am understanding roughly how it works. But maybe we should pause here and see if people have feedback on the sort of the bigger concept and the vocabulary. I think I certainly have. Who feels like going first? Nobody?
I had one more question, if I may. I keep asking.
That's good.
You'll hop in. And that was, you said this happens once per day. Is that another security element where this process has to be restarted once per day to just make sure the system as a whole, that there are different checks happening? Or
no, I say once per day because it was just like something like I imagine someone just going to work, he just start to have his coffee, and during his drinking his coffee, he just start signing secure transactions, and that's it. Just it's only the only thing he has to do to make the funds secured and usable by managers.
So I have a follow-up question on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Daniel. I think I also have a question.
I was curious about like who is likely to make the decision of what transactions are required here? Because if the managers are sort of executing, is moving funds from, say, the Vault to Kraken or other exchanges for whatever reason, but they can only do that for pre-approved transactions. Am I correct in thinking that the manager, say the day before, suggests a new transaction to the stakeholder, and then when they wake up and have their coffee, are they approving transactions that was suggested by someone else, or do the stakeholder come up with the pre-approved transactions? I'm a bit unclear about where they originate, who kind of comes up with the idea.
That's a good question because we still don't have clients. Our product is not finished yet, so we don't know the real use case of how the funds are allocated. But we can imagine that each month the stakeholder, we say, okay, each month I will delegate to my manager 1 or 2 million. So I activate the vault, I sign the own vault transaction, and I share it to the managers. And I say, okay, you have 1 month to manage 1 million. But the fact of securing is only for me. I pre-sign transaction with other stakeholders in order to have emergency transactions in case something happens. Like an emergency transaction can be interesting if one day, I don't know, everybody has a threat or something like this, and we want to migrate the funds to an even bigger multi-sig. And for this, we already have the emergency transaction signed, and every stakeholder can broadcast it.
Okay, thank you. Alexa, you had a question.
Yeah, I do. I think I'm understanding the process a little bit. You have the stakeholders, which are sort of the team members that pass on these transactions, and the manager approves them. And where do the watchtowers fit in? Because I mean, can the manager just cancel it, and that's kind of what the process is? Or you were mentioning watchtowers canceling them too. Like, how would they? I don't know. How would that work, or why would they cancel them? I don't know.
Yes, actually, it's the stakeholders are giving to the managers the pre-signed transactions, and the managers will specify new transactions which are spending the pre-signed transactions. And these pre-signed transactions can be spent by the watchtower, who can then just cancel the funds. And the idea of the watchtower is the stakeholders just want to secure the funds. He pre-signs the transactions, but he don't want to watch the blockchain every day or every hour like crazy. Like wow, I hope my managers are not doing something bad with my money. I just want to have some software somewhere watching the blockchain, maybe on an air-gapped wallet with Blockstream satellite stuff. And if the watchtower can see that, oh, it's weird, there is more, 1 million is moving a day. 1 million is definitely too much for managers. No managers has the power technically to move 1 million. I chose to cancel the transactions and sending back the funds to the stakeholders. The idea is, it's very important to understand that in Bitcoin, for the moment, there is no way to enforce spending policies on future UTXO. It does not exist. You cannot say, okay, I give you this UTXO, but you only can spend it like this. I know that Jeremy Robin is working on something called the Covenants, and with the OP check template verify, but it's not. It needs a soft fork, I think, for to go in Bitcoin. But the idea is, yes, you can't have at the level of the Bitcoin scripts have something to prevent to enforce spending policies. And the idea to imagine these two-step transactions, like where you have the unvault and then the spend transactions, it gives you some time during the unvault to start enforcing spending policies for the first time. For the first time, you can have somewhere on the planet with only a satellite connection, only watching the blockchain, can say, hey, the funds are moving, it's not safe. There is, I don't know, we can imagine a lot of stuff. That's why it's very interesting with Watchtower, because it brings a lot of new possibilities. Watchtower can say, hey, funds are moving during Sunday. Sunday, technically, managers are not working. So I say, no, I cancel the transactions. And that's all new possibilities that we can imagine after, like Watchtower saying, okay, we don't want funds moving during the night. It's not possible, technically.
Thank you. I think that clears it up. So it's more about like spending limits and little extra protections for things like a last step before anything gets sent. And like, I don't know, when you send in the transactions that you want to the manager, is there a way for the manager to know what they're for? Like, because if they just have addresses, then I think it would make it difficult to understand unless they can talk about those somehow. I don't know, maybe I haven't quite looked into that.
I think we in the when I will show the GUI, everything will be maybe more clear of what is the role of each user, because yes, it's quite complicated.
Yeah, I think that will be clear then. Let's see if we have any feedback on the sort of terminology, vocabulary, etc.
It's super easy.
Exactly what I thought. Go ahead, Christoph.
No, I have no questions. Just stupid comments. Please go ahead. I'm curious to hear about the interface.
I would like to share a few thoughts, but I'll share more notes later. But I started approaching the project from the website, and then I went to the GitHub, and then I looked at the Figma file, and I think the sort of summary is that it was quite clear what the goal was when I first went to the website, but then as I dove into all these different terms, I had to work quite hard to understand what these new to me terms meant. So I think the short summary is to see if you can find words that people might already know that describe some of the actions that you have in your product. Just some examples that you've already mentioned, like unvault was one word that I didn't instinctively understand what it meant. I think I understand now, but I wonder if there are other words that explain the action that people don't need to relearn. For example, releasing funds, unlocking funds. Also, the fact that vault is used as I think it's used as the description of the multi-sig in this case. It's also in the product name, and then it's also in these kind of actions, like it's in the unvaulting, but it's not, there is no comparative vaulting action in the product. So anyway, there's a kind of a big bucket of feedback around which terms you use. And I can share more details later.
Yeah, I totally agree that even for our team, we will not agree on what's a good term for a vault, and what's the meaning of a vault creation. Before that, we talk about the fact of acknowledge the font, the fact of someone is signing the pre-signed transactions and sharing it to the managers. But now we want to say the creation of a vault, which is the fact of signing the pre-signed transaction for an UTXO. Yeah, so see if I show the GUI, you have the stakeholder part on the manager part. Our idea of a stakeholder is just connect to his home, and he can see the fonts. So you have this idea of, I don't know if you can see, you have 4 testnet BTC received in one deposit. The idea is, yes, you have fonts arriving in the multisig as one UTXO, and you want to sign the pre-signed transactions spending this UTXO. So for this, we call that acknowledging the font. which is very bad. Maybe we'll change later for create fonts. It's a second part. You click on yeah, it's a little button. We need to change it. You click on acknowledge fonts. Yep. So you have the list of each UTXO you received, and you see which UTXO has no emergency transaction spending it. For example, you have in green the one where the stakeholder signed the emergency transaction, and in black the one there no emergency transaction signed. So you have this step where the user has to sign the free revocation transaction. The revocation transaction are the transactions that can spend the unvault on the unvault transaction and send it back to the stakeholder. We choose to make the stakeholder sign it first, the revocation transaction, before the unvault transaction. Like we want to be safe, to have every transaction that can interrupt the spending process before activating the funds. Yes. So for the moment, the GUI only use PSBT. We have no connection to hardware wallets for the moment. And yes, when the free revocation transactions are signed, you can see that the balance in acknowledged funds is bigger. You have some funds waiting for other stakeholder signatures. And these funds are what we call secure, because these are UTXOs that can be sent back to the stakeholders at any time during the process the process of the spending. So now the stakeholders has the funds secured, but he wants to delegate them to the managers. In order to delegate them, he go to the delegate funds panel. So yeah, the delegate funds panel is horrible. We change it this week, but it's not. I did not update the Figma. You have the funds. You see that 0 TBTC are delegated to the manager. So the manager currently have no funds to manage, to use, to spend, to pay Kraken, to pay other people they want. So we need to give them some funds. The stakeholders, they say, okay, I will delegate, I don't know, 3 BTC for this month. So he choose which vaults he wants to delegate. And in order to delegate them, he signs the unvault transaction. It's the transaction that is locking that he is spending the UTXO directly.
And do you have to delegate the whole vault?
Yes, a vault for us is one UTXO. So each time
okay.
A vault is one UTXO, and the unvault is a fact of moving the UTXO to the manager multisig.
Right. I think that was a revelation to me. I had somehow a mental image of the vault being the complete, either the complete, all the funds that I can see in this GUI, or that there were several vaults inside of that I could then manage funds in bits and pieces from. But now I understand your version of it.
Yeah, it was. at the beginning, I think 6 months ago, we thought about that. Maybe we could change and say that all the process, all this UTXO management is only one vault. But it was very difficult to explain to the stakeholders why they have to sign transactions for every UTXO. So finally, we say, okay, one UTXO is one vault, and the fact of unvaulting it is the fact of sending it to the manager multisig. With the log.
There's no way of delegating without unvaulting, correct?
Yes, because we don't want if we give directly the funds to the managers, we lost some security. We lost the security that the pre-signed transactions give us, because the pre-signed transactions are spending the unvault TX.
So delegating is, in fact, it means that you're unvaulting in the process, right? It's just a technical thing that happens beneath the surface. Does the user need to know about the distinction between delegating and unvaulting?
The fact the delegating is giving the unvault transaction to the manager, but the manager will broadcast it after when he needs it.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe we could remove the unvault stuff here and just say, okay, just sign the transaction. The idea of delegating is just to sign the transaction, not broadcast it, only just give it to the manager.
So the unvaulting doesn't come into effect until at a later point when the manager chooses.
Yes, the managers want to spend. He only can spend what the unvaulting he can only spend the result of the unvaulting transaction.
Okay, understood. Just a time check here. We're at 40 minutes in, so I think maybe we should try and move to a state where you can get some feedback from people. Does anybody want to comment on this stakeholder flow? Someone that's done the pre-read? Or have questions about it?
So I've got a question. When we when a user is going through this flow and they are given the option to delegate a vault to a manager, is it set up so that they are delegating the vault to like all the managers of their company, or would you have a situation where you would delegate this vault to Alice, the manager, and then delegate this vault to Bob, the manager, and they would have different vaults?
It can be a feature maybe in another way. Maybe we can have some different teams of managers, but right now we only have one team of managers. So when you delegate funds, you delegate funds to the team of managers, and they still have a multisig. Maybe if there are two managers, they still need both of them to sign the spend transaction.
Got it. One just piece of feedback, a quick piece of feedback is, I think, I think this is a very polished looking user, UI design you have right here. Like it looks like it's got good typography and layout and all of that. So it's a nice looking design. But what I think would improve this is some way to kind of portray the human element. So to understand for someone, I guess for a business leader who would be using Revault to be able to understand what these things correspond to in human terms. And I can't really tell you exactly what you should be doing there, because I think you'll probably know your potential, customer, your potential user better than me. But So I'm like to my question about, well, who are the managers? So, is there some way that instead of it just saying like delegate to the managers, there could be like little profile pictures of the managers, or maybe there's a way that like the person using the software could like name the managers something different so that it makes sense for their company. So like, at my corporation, it's called the accounts payable department. But at my company, it's, just the accounting department. What the word managers might mean something different depending on the company. So I would just, I would consider thinking of ways that you can take the user interface and, just make it really clear to the user who in their organization the managers correspond to.
Yeah, definitely. We talk about that. We're still not clear even for ourselves of how to give yes, the idea was to have pictures of the managers, like you said, but we don't want to implement that for now. We are really at our stage of the implementation. We're really at the beginning. We don't have the watchtowers, for example. So yes, I think it would be nice features to add. But each time we add a new feature, we ask ourselves, it's in terms of security, is it good? Maybe the pictures can help an attacker to, I don't know. At this level, it may be difficult to know, but we can imagine new features better for someone who is not really a Bitcoin friendly, just to understand what he's doing. But we are very, we are fear to just to give him fake information, like fake profile pictures can make him, I don't know, delegate too much funds. I don't know. We at this stage of the implementation, sadly. But yes, thank you very much for the feedback, because definitely give just to say we delegate funds to manager means nothing for normal. Normal stakeholder.
Christoph, any thoughts on this, Flo?
Well, I'm just thinking. So big picture, the product provides peace of mind, and it provides a workflow. It's like a workflow tool, and there are multiple people who interact with different things. They have different rules and different relationships. And I was just looking, if I put myself in the mind of a stakeholder, what do I want to see? I want to know everything's in order. I want to pull up the home screen. I want to see, okay, I want it to show me like, here are all the things that are going on, and I want to see what status that they're in, right? What do I want to see as a manager? So it seems to me that the one of the most important things in the interface is to get a clear idea of where things are right now, and if I should be doing anything, or if anything has happened. Like, I was just wondering, well, what does it look like if the watchtower acts for some reason? Like, how do I get informed? How do I know? Do I get an email? Do I see? Is there a home feed where it says, okay, yesterday you assigned this to this manager. Today the watchtower reacted on something because of whatever condition. I'm just trying to think through kind of what's important for me in these different roles, and most likely like what I would want to see, what would be the most useful for me. You have a lot of the steps laid out here. I'm just trying to kind of think through the human element of that. And one of the most important things, I think, with a lot of these security things is, let's say I'm looking at the spent transaction screen, being very clear about this is what you're doing right now, and this is what happens next. Like, here's what you need to worry about right now. Like, when you're signing a transaction, make sure you do this and this and this. And if you press sign, this is what's going to happen next. Because let's say you hand this over to a manager, then you want to ensure that you're doing the right thing that matches what you're intending to do. Yeah, those are just some of my thoughts going through my head. But yeah, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, Eduard, if you jump to the Figma tab that says Stakeholder Home. Yeah, exactly. And I think Christoph had some great points around the user flow that I hadn't thought about, but some thoughts that I had around this here, and I think it's a good starting point. There's the sidebar, which is sort of different places in the app, right? And then there's settings, and then there's some actions here. So one of my first thoughts was like this place where I select which role I have, the stakeholder, the manager. I was wondering, that's probably not something I'm going to change very often, because the whole point is that I'm not both a stakeholder and a manager, if I understand correctly. So I would maybe move this out of here, maybe to the top right or something, potentially even into settings, but I think it could be useful if it was available somewhat, but not like the main focus. Then the second thing I thought about here in the sidebar was like the selected state is this red rectangle, which to me looks like a button, like the most important call to action on the whole page. So I would probably change the way that you show the selected state of these and reserve, this kind of look to an actual button. And then you got the history tab, which I kind of imagine what it's going to be. Then I wondered about network. I am guessing that it's like a status thing. The green light probably means that everything's okay. But I also wondered if that was of equal importance to these two. Maybe this could go down here by settings or something, or maybe again, it's just a green light somewhere else. And then I was wondering about deposit and delegate funds. And now that I know that a vault is kind of one transaction in itself, it might make more sense to have them here. But I sort of wondered whether these actions should live inside the page where you have the different vaults listed. But anyway. And then when I looked at the actual home page, I first sort of saw the difference here. This is called home, this is called overview, and with a lowercase, that sort of felt a bit unprofessional. And then I was wondering about all the numbers here that to me at first didn't quite match up. So there are funds here, but they're not in an acknowledged funds. Okay, so I guess they're here in received. And then there's one vault, but here there's 0 volts. So I guess there's a unacknowledged vault coming in. And then now I understand that this is probably something I can click on and actually do something. But below here, it felt like the wrong place for this. And this is what I think Christoph meant about like, what should I be doing right now? And this seems like something I should be doing. So I wonder if there's a different way of showing that. Like, it seems a bit too unimportant for what it should be doing. I'll stop there. That was a lot of feedback in one go.
Yes, thank you. The little button you can see on the stakeholder where you can change the role, it's only when you are a stakeholder manager, when you both secure the funds and you are a manager and you want to spend funds. But yes, maybe we should remove it and move it somewhere else. For the red, yes, I think too that the red is too aggressive. It's the design was we contracted a designer a long time ago, and we had some design. I started from here, but definitely if we can change something on the color, on the way to display things, we can just change it.
Do you have a designer on the team at the moment?
No designer. We are only 4 people, and. Yes, on the acknowledge function is a button, yes, and it's not visible that it's a button. And you guess it right, it's the vault is a deposit. It's not technically a vault, we should not write it. Maybe we should have a balance 0 just to make sure that the stakeholder say, hey, my balance is 0, but I received something. I want my balance to be not 0, so I will start acknowledging funds.
Yeah, and I think this comes back to vocabulary as well. To me, acknowledged funds, I don't quite understand what that means because it's already there, right? Like acknowledge means like, okay, they exist. So I wonder if, what's the action that I'm actually doing here?
Yeah. We are thinking to change the word for create vaults and just say that a deposit is not a vault. And when you acknowledge, when you secure it, it's a vault because you have the relocation transaction. So we think to change the acknowledge for create new vaults. Create new vaults from deposits.
Great. Does someone else want to jump in with feedback here? Otherwise, maybe we go to a different place.
Yeah, well, I have a couple of things to say. Hopefully, I'm not repeating what anybody else has said.
No? If you jump to the next, where you have the flow with the acknowledge funds, the next tab, so on the first screen here, I'm guessing that I have to, so this is made, I'm not sure where I came to the screen from, because in the previous one, there was a button where I could acknowledge incoming funds, and then presumably I would go straight to this frame 2. But anyway, on this screen, I thought that maybe what I'm supposed to do is click on this black one, but it was a bit unclear. So I wonder if there could be a title here, and whether it's called select transaction or something. And I think Alexa had a good point earlier about naming things. Like this is, this is not very user friendly. I don't have any way of distinguishing these. So maybe there would be a way of labeling them. And then on the second frame here, it says vault details. So I guess I clicked on this one and came here. And then there's again more detail about it here, but I'm missing a name or label. And then there's again, it's a different address down here, but the amount is the same. So I was a bit confused what the difference between this box and this box is. And then I assumed, okay, now I need to do something. And there's a big red button here, which seems like the most important thing. So that's probably where I should click. But then I wondered, should I click on this? So it wasn't quite clear to me what I should be doing next on this screen. And then I somehow get to this one. So the sign transaction button looks identical to the one before. That's why I started thinking, okay, maybe I pressed on this one. So maybe the emergency transaction, if that is the main call to action, that should be clear. And then again, like I came back to vocabulary, like emergency transaction, is that really what I want to do? I was supposed to acknowledge funds, right? So the words don't kind of match up with the activity I thought I was doing here. Okay, and then I see this, and then I have to go get my PSPT, and I guess I paste that in. And I get to the next one. Okay, I did one thing here that should be green. So now I'm not quite sure why the second thing is also green, but never mind. And then why does it say cancel transaction? It looks like I should be doing this, this, and this. So that had me confused.
Yeah, cancel transaction is key here because you feel like if you press it, you're going to cancel what you're currently doing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, you don't have to respond to all this. I was just like sharing what I was thinking as I went through this flow, and then I came to the end, frame 5 here, and now maybe this doesn't match up to the screen you had in the stakeholder home tab, but now suddenly I have delegated funds, which is outlined in red, and I have a total amount here, and I have 11 volts, but here it says 3 volts, and here it says 3 volts, so that's 6.
Yeah.
Here's one you deposit, so I didn't quite know where all the numbers came from.
Yeah, I think it does not match with the previous stakeholder.
That's fine. That's fine, but it doesn't seem to match on this screen either. But maybe that's just because some of these vaults are elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then the final thought here was like, again, now I understood that delegate funds and acknowledge funds are buttons. And to me, they feel like if they are very important actions here, they should probably be clearer and maybe, somewhere up here where you feel like action buttons make sense or something, or at least not separated.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the idea is that that these deposits go through a series of steps, and the hierarchy, the vertical hierarchy reflects those series of steps. Maybe that could just be visualized differently to make it more obvious.
Got it.
That was the idea, but I totally agree with you that we should add more title in the user flow, just upstairs, like you said. Yes, we don't know why to click on the why. The fact of acknowledge font is to sign the emergency, then the emergency in Vault, then the cancel.
I think that it
Yeah.
is a question.
And are these green transactions here? Are they
Can
already
you actually hear me?
acknowledged?
No.
I can hear you. I can
can?
hear you, Alexa.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think-
Daniel has a lot to
Sorry,
say.
Daniel.
Sorry, no, I didn't hear you. I'll shut up now.
Or maybe my mic is a little low. Who knows? Yeah, I think it's a thing of terms. I think that if you think of delegate, maybe you should have something like send to approve. And once you get to the manager side, you can have a list of things to approve. And that way, when you get to the point of sign transaction, you could have approve or not, I don't know what's the opposite of approve. I can't think of the word right now. But, that way it makes it easier to understand that it's not cancel. It's like you're either approving or the opposite of that.
Reject.
Reject. Yes. Thank you, Stephen, for helping with that. Because otherwise and I know there's probably 3 different reasons why you have those options, like the emergency on Vault, and the cancel. So maybe once you put reject, it would kind of tell you what the options are or something like that. But I think the main thing would be to approve, because I think what they'd be doing most of the time is approving. And yes, the labeling would be really useful, I think, to managers. Otherwise, it would feel like they'd have to do a lot more work in order to figure out what transactions they're actually approving.
Totally different question. Let's say a company incorporates this. Would all companies use the same standard setup, or would there be company-specific rules that somehow have to be communicated?
We don't know what companies use right now. It's everything is closed source, so we hope to bring some protocol, some new conventional thing to secure the vaults, to secure funds. So yeah, we don't know what other companies are using for this. I guess maybe they have some HSM stuff where they can start delivering signatures, but at the end, it's always the same thing. It's only a multi-sig with maybe 2 or 3 keys holders.
I kind of agree with what Stephen was saying as far as being able to name something differently. Because if you're the manager and you get a list of stakeholders and they all say stakeholder, please approve this, I think it would be difficult to figure out who is trying to tell you to approve things. So maybe if you could add their name, or if you're creating multiple vaults, maybe to be able to designate what they're for. So say create, instead of the acknowledge one, I think it's a good idea to have the create vault. But you could say create vault for, and that way you know that those funds are dedicated for that specific area.
Yes.
It may not be as useful.
Yes, totally. We need to have another way to just say, hey, you give money to other people. But at this stage of the acknowledge vault, nothing is done for the manager yet. we are just pre-signing the transactions in case of there is a problem. The idea is, for example, you are a stakeholder and you have some kind of emergency. So we added a button emergency on the sidebar. You can see here. You can say, oh, my funds are in danger. I don't know what's the reason, but I want to broadcast every emergency transactions or sending everything to a special multisig with even more people securing it. You have already signed the emergency transaction, and you can broadcast it directly. And all the funds are sent back, even the funds that you delegate to the managers. Because the funds are not in the managers multisig when they are delegated to the managers. When the funds are delegated to managers, it means they only have the pre-signed transaction of unlocking them. It is totally not in their multisig. It means that at any time, a stakeholder can say, "Hey, my funds are in danger. I can send every funds, even the funds I give to manager. I can save everything and send it back to somewhere, I don't know, a ledger or something like that."
Instead of calling it emergency transaction, I wonder if it could be describing what's actually happening. I think you almost said it yourself now. You're basically recalling all your funds, right? So that's just a thought, or maybe considering that naming as well. I mean, emergency sounds very important. It also sounds very scary, which is probably correct in that instance, but it doesn't actually describe much what's going to happen. It's just if it's called emergency transaction. So I would maybe just have that action be recall funds or something.
Yeah, maybe frozen. We say that the funds are totally frozen in the other place.
But frozen isn't quite right either, right? Because you actually get them under your control again. Or, I mean, you have them here. Anyway, just a thought.
This is a good design challenge.
One other thing that you could do is, you have the separate vaults, but maybe you can go into each vault and then see the list of transactions. So you see like the vault title at the top and the transactions listed. That way it makes it easier, because right now you have like delegate funds and acknowledge funds, and it's kind of confusing. So if you have a list of vaults when you arrive, if there's multiple ones, so there was just one, and then you get to the vault and see the list, I think it would make it easier.
We're a little over the... Oh, please go ahead.
No, continue.
We're just a little bit over the hour now, I guess. So I just want to... I would move towards just kind of asking like what would be good next steps to do. If anybody wants to keep talking, we can totally do that as well. But I was just curious, what are your biggest design challenge? What would you like help with? These types of things.
Yeah, we have a lot of design challenge. I think you saw it right now. I will just show you just all this idea of delegating, of acknowledging the funds are already a big challenge. We have the challenge also for a manager when you receive funds and you want to spend it. I think you have some example. Because you have a new challenge for the manager. The manager, for example, receives the pre-signed on-vault transaction. So the funds are in his hands. But imagine that you want to broadcast the Revault the on-vault transaction, and for another problem, the fees are too high. So it means that the manager has another little wallet. We can say a fee bumping wallet, and when he needs to to have the spend transactions go through the mempool, you will need to have a way to broadcast the on-vault transaction, use the CPFP output, that's the on-vault transaction, and in the spend output. And in the same time, if the spend output is not enough, has not enough money to pass the mempool, he has to rebroadcast another spend transaction, which can just bypass. I don't know. We need to find a solution in terms of UX, or to rebroadcast another spend transaction, or to have maybe a spend something to even more complicated, like have. Yeah, I don't know if you know what is a CP, what does a CPFP mean? The term.
Child pays for a parent.
Yes, it's when you need to create a new spend that is spending a parent, and in order to increase the fees you want to give to the miner.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this UX problem of how to rebroadcast the spend transaction with more fees that is spending the on-vault.
This makes me think as well of the challenge or the work of setting up and administrating this whole organization, if you like, which seems like a considerable task. But what you just described sounds like something that every manager and every stakeholder should not necessarily need to worry about. I'm not sure if that's technically feasible, but like from a design perspective or a user perspective, I would imagine that like if I'm a manager, I shouldn't really have to, top up my own fees. That should be somehow predetermined from a small pot somewhere that this whole Revault setup can make use of. It's almost like, you fill up the car with gas to just pay those small amounts.
Yes, it's right that for a stakeholder, you don't really care because you are not managing the funds, so you just give signatures and that's it. For managers, we still don't really know what will happen to the Bitcoin network. We don't know how a pre-signed transaction how the Bitcoin network will deal with a mempool congested and things like this, and how to fee bump your spend. So I think you will have the same problem for other wallets than just Revault and pre-signed transactions.
Yeah. To follow on Christoph's comments about the time and next steps and stuff, I was wondering like where you think you are in the process of getting to, version 1 of this, when you feel like you're going to, sign up real users here, real organizations. Are you, where is that on the time horizon?
We are trying to rush to have some maybe a good release for the Miami Bitcoin conference. So it's in a few months. It will be very hard to be ready, but we want to move quickly because we still don't have clients yet.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. I think this is a fascinating problem and a fascinating product. The use case, I'm sure, is going to grow massively. It's extremely complicated as well, and I think one of the important things is to really make sure that it's reasonably easy to get set up here. And my initial thoughts when reading the website and going to the GitHub page was that it's not easy. But I am certainly excited to see what we can do beyond this design review call to help you and keep giving feedback, or see if there's any other way we can support you, given that you don't have any designers on the team. which maybe hint I would recommend you to look at getting.
Yes, definitely. Once we manage to have some money, we definitely will recruit some designer, I think, or someone that can help us to other experience problem. One of the challenge we will have, for example, is the watchtower. How do you give fonts to your watchtower, your personal watchtower? Because we want everybody every stakeholder needs to have his own watchtower if you want to be trustless. So how can you give how he will put fonts inside his watchtower? Because the watchtower, the problem is for the watchtower you need to have a wallet. You need to have enough fonts in the wallet of the watchtower to fee bumping the cancel transaction in case of a mempool congested. You need to have a way to update the watchtower spending policies. Is it with files, with a file that the stakeholder will specify like a pseudocode saying, hey, I don't want to, if Sunday cancel, I don't know. It's a lot of design we still are not clear on it. Very interesting. And we have the problem of the hardware wallet, for example. I don't know if you use today a hardware wallet, you will have you don't have the script on the hardware wallet. You only have the hash of a script. You have you sign for an address, for example. So you check you have the same address. But we want hardware wallet to be able to say to the user, hey, you are signing a pre-signed transaction, you are signing an emergency transaction. This emergency transaction has a good the good address, yes, but you are already signing the Unvault transaction. On this Unvault transaction, you have to check on the hardware wallet if you have the good lock time, for example.
I know you said you don't have any, users at the moment, but do you have any organizations or institutions that you imagine want to become users? I'm just trying to get to the point of you need feedback, I think. I think you need feedback from real potential users. We have feedback on what we can see from the UI here, but we don't necessarily know anything about how a financial institution managing millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin wants to organize this. Do you have any like those that you can get real feedback from?
I'm not personally in touch with Enterprise. I think it's more a question for Kevin and Antoine, who are the real Bitcoin OG, we can say. I don't know. I don't have the detail of all this kind of information, but I want to say that it's because everything is closed source. It's because nobody knows how big enterprise protect their Bitcoins that I think we can bring something new to the space. Like we have this protocol totally open source. Everything is on MIT or I don't know the license, but everybody can run the code and just start to have it for their enterprise. We think that one day if big enterprise will use Revault, we can have some business use case like replicating watchtowers for them and stuff like this. Or help them to set up watchtowers, for example. And
I think there's definitely a need. I'm just trying to get the point across that I think there's so many unknowns in your whole system, and having a few real points of feedback would probably help you move much faster in the right direction. Anyway, just my closing point that it would probably be really useful.
The better feedbacks are definitely people who are using the software every day. Definitely, we need to have people like breaking up the stuff and saying, hey, my button does not work, stuff like this.
If I can, First of all, thanks to all of you for the feedback. Like, I've been taking notes and I have a lot of things now. And we were thinking about doing like usability tests, like finding some volunteers or maybe hiring someone for just a couple of hours and just giving the GUI to them and just saying, hey, please try to spend, try to secure a vault or something and see what happens. So we were looking into that, and we could probably do that even internally because not all of us are really working on the GUI. So some people don't look at it that much, and I think that could help. What do you think about it? I mean, did you ever do this kind of usability tests, or are you more used to something else? I don't know. I've never done anything like that, so yeah.
I would definitely do that, but I was talking about even before you get to the GUI, understanding what kind of, what does the client look like, right? When you were talking recently about watchtowers and every stakeholder needing a watchtower, I was wondering, does a potential client, are they one stakeholder or are they several inside? I was imagining like for example, a crypto investment fund, right? I don't even know, and it doesn't sound completely like either. How many stakeholders would there be? How many managers would there be? What's the sort of setup internally, and what the needs are that would dictate, what should even be in the GUI. So I was thinking a bit more on the earlier side, like what's the kind of scenario here that you're trying to solve for?
Danielle,
sorry.
so I was just going to say real quick, I think that doing user testing is a really good idea once you have your GUI built. One thing that might be helpful to you earlier in this process as you're building the GUI would be to just look at what kinds of software your potential users are actually using, because we don't have the majority of the companies and corporations on the globe are still using fiat currencies right now. So they're probably using some kind of software to manage their accounting or to manage who in the company has access to which bank accounts. So obviously what you're building here is not going to be a complete clone of the fiat applications they're using. It's Bitcoin. It needs to function differently. But I think it's worth understanding what kinds of software the users right now and what kinds of things they're already accustomed to and what kinds of things they might expect from financial software.
Yeah, and I think those are also, we're mixing a whole bunch of different discussions. One of them is, the product market fit, which features are right, what are the expectations of the client, how do they work internally? And that's very different from polishing, a series of interface steps or figuring out how to label things, and I think in that regard, a professional designer can take you pretty far because they have experience knowing, what good patterns are, how to label things properly, how to create visual hierarchies so it's clear what's a button, what isn't. And then, the end users, they can also give good feedback, and they won't be the design experts who can maybe articulate exactly what should change, but you can observe them, you can see where they stumble. And what's obvious for them, and I've done that with, for example, with insurance a few years ago with insurance agents. Before I observed them using software where they set up these insurance policies, and it was really interesting. Sometimes they would lean forward or they would kind of grab a paper, and you could tell by their actions and how they were physically moving and reacting what they saw on the screen whether the interface made sense for them or it didn't. And I think observing ideally real potential users, but if you have people are familiar with enterprise Bitcoin, might get you close enough, or with high security setups, might also get you close enough. But I just want to make sure we don't confuse we don't mix up all of the conversations around, is this the right product? What are people's expectations? What should the overall shape of it be like versus the polishing the interface and making that usable.
Awesome. I will. I think I will stop recording here and sort of stop the official part of the call. But we can all feel free to stay on a few minutes if we want, or for those of you who need to go, thank you for your time, and see you next time.